Welcome, everyone. This is the meeting where we are going to see some updates in terms of the work that Simone Collins has been doing. And really, I'm going to just turn it over to you, Anita.
Thank you. So nice to see you all. July got here really fast. It seemed like July, when we were going to show you draft concepts, was going to be far away, and it's here. It's exciting, it really is. So we'll start with the meeting, and there's our cover sheet. Thanks, Michelle. Next slide. Great. Folks, we have a lot to get through because the whole juice of this meeting is, of course, looking at these concepts. But you have to see a lot of stuff of how we got there first. So we're going to try to move this along, and I will stop certainly at each agenda point to let you ask questions or comments as you need to. But really, we just felt it was important that you hear a lot about the survey, the analysis, the technical analysis of the site, and how that all is going to translate into what Michelle's going to do for concepts, right? So, number one on our agenda is the status update. So next slide is going to be the schedule, just to remind us where we are. Thank you. Our vision statement, I always start getting back to our beautifully crafted vision statement, of course, which is strengthening the Narberth community. Really, I can just say that because really everything that we're trying to do here is improving what is so great about this community. So we just remember that as we're going forward. Next slide. Again, we are still, could you go back, Michelle, for one? Thank you. Right. The master plan, right? So down at the bottom, we are developing, we've analyzed the site, we're developing a program. All of your input on the program and the images you see tonight are going to be critical. Fine-tuning based on key person interviews and stakeholders is going to make that our preferred, plan for you. So the preliminary concepts, you can see they're highlighted tonight. Draft plan, review period, and then hopefully approving it. So next slide. So here we are in July. We have a lot of work to do based on your input today, like I said, the rest of the survey, and those incredible and important key person interviews. But our next committee meeting is that early part of September, where we are going to show you, based on all of those meetings, a draft plan, right? Still commenting, it is still a draft. There's going to be certainly a period of time for people to comment on that. But the public meeting to show that is going to be in October, and then, of course, bringing it before the Borough Council. So time just goes so fast. We know how fast it goes. All right, updates on the key person interviews and the survey. So here's our listing of the 12 key person interviews that we had discussed as having. One is the Ecological, Narberth History Business Association, the Co-op, and the Library, Co-op Gardens, the Civic Association, the Cycling Club. Orange is initial contact made. Yellow is actually scheduled. And green is completed. So of the 12, we've completed the one with Montgomery County Planning Commission. Very interesting information with Marley Weiss. So it was great to talk to her and see where the study for the active transportation plan was. And coincidentally, that plan and that report is going to be published about the same time that we're trying to wrap up ours. So the gist of our conversation with Montgomery County Planning Commission was, how far are they into making their recommendations about locations of the Greenway on Haverford Avenue? So we had a great back and forth exchange. We were going to be in contact. We kind of gave them our opinions about how that Greenway will affect Narberth Park. So that was a great one to complete. This is like herding cats. I know you all know that for sure. And summer never makes that easy. But everybody's been so enthusiastic and they've been so grateful to be included. So we're getting close on a lot of these other ones as well, including the Philadelphia Independence Network. I finally got an address and a phone number, and literally, I haven't gotten a phone call back, but before dinner, I just ran over and put a note in the mailbox there. So hopefully we can make all of these happen. I'm pushing hard for finishing these all in July, and as many as we can in August. Again, because that informs what we're going to be working on for the edits to plans. Next one, Michelle. Stakeholder meetings, same thing. We've reached out, had a lot of great responses, Dennis, from the park users, circling in on days that can actually happen. Just today, I reached out. Ben DeMeo was kind enough to give me the contact at Lower Merion School District. She's on vacation this week, but we will get that one scheduled. That one's going to be a little tricky, but I'm hoping that we can do that when people are back right before Labor Day. That's what I'm targeting for that one. And of course, this is something I want to talk with Alan about. We've talked and had advertised at our public meeting that the Station Square stakeholders meeting will be a public meeting. So Alan and I do have to talk about where that fits best on the calendar for the borough. I put some tentative weeks there, Alan, so maybe we can talk about that because I'd like to get that out to everyone who's interested in that, and the farmers market for sure. So there's where we are. Lots of emails and lots of me keeping a very detailed spreadsheet about who's gotten back. But again, it's a good feeling about moving forward on that. There we go, 381. I was even wrong about the number.
Whoa.
Can I ask something about the KPIs? The
Sure.
ones that were in white,
Yes.
is it that you don't have a contact or you have a contact and nothing's happened?
No, I literally have just crafted all of that and pulled together all the contacts. So
Okay, so you know, because I know people who are very concerned.
No, absolutely. That group is pretty big.
Yeah, that's
for
easy.
sure, but that's great. But all of them have been to the public meeting, and I've already been speaking to
Okay,
Lower
I just
Merion
wanted to make
concerns.
sure with those
Yeah,
white
there's
ones that
nothing,
there's
yeah,
something
that,
happening.
that's Anita just not pushing a button or anything.
Yeah.
Quick enough, so, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think, right, seniors, yeah, they have been responsive, even in the summer, so this
Yeah,
will happen,
they've been
it'll be good, yeah. All right, where were we to the survey? 381, I said 378, so I don't know who actually won. So, there we go. All right, just generally, and this I will, again, since you have access to this, I know that many of you can take a look at this yourself. So this is I spent a lot of time looking at all of that. There was so much work, Michael, on all of those responses that we were eliciting from people. So I wanted to kind of give you some feedback. You've probably seen about how many people of our 381 actually input, but we'll get to that. General responses, things that probably do not surprise any of you. The majority of the people that have responded are from our 24 to 45 and 45 to 65. Predominantly white, predominantly Narberth residents, although the other surprised me, the 24% that were not Narberth residents that have responded, that was a little higher than I thought for us. The average residency is 15 years. When you drill down, it's a great balance of people who are new residents and people who've been here for a really long time. So that's just the average. So I think that we get a lot of newness. We get a lot of people who have been here for a long time, and that's a good thing. Why did you move to Narberth? And it was really close for all three of those. The location was the number one. Why you moved to Narberth. And as you might remember, schools was close second, environment very close third. Environment I described in the survey as not only the physical environment, but the community feel. And how well, question 14, are different age groups served by Narberth parks? Fair to good was the range for the age groups. What was of note for question 14 was that everyone felt that the younger age groups were well served. And as the ages went up, they felt they were less well served. So that was the fair. So the older folks were definitely saying they are not as well served by the parks systems in Narberth as the younger folks. Next one. Oh, I'm sorry, let's go over to quick question 15. Your favorite type of park features overall. Not in Narberth, just overall park features. The three in the middle, I think, are all tied. Outdoor activities, the community events, and the playgrounds are all kind of heavy right there at the high 60%. Natural habitats and passive recreation, which is walking and biking, right? So that is certainly number one in the entire survey. But those other three are all bunched right there in the middle. So I think you kind of get a sense as the survey goes on, community events are really, really important in Narberth. Next one. Question 17 and question 18, again, still general. What are your desired park features? Now this was the write-in, Michael, so look at that, like 273 out of 381 who responded similarly for the programming. You know, that's the highest we got for people who actually were gonna write something in. So that's good knowledge for us too, but they were great responses. Natural features, new playgrounds, great events, picnic and food options, safe shade trees, some type of water, walking trails, unstructured space. Everybody wants it all, absolutely. So that's what they want for desired features. End of statement. So, desired programming, definitely events were high. The farmers market was mentioned quite a few times. They love things in the park, that's an event. Next one. Overall satisfaction with Narberth Park. So now we're specific about Narberth Park. The rankings were most satisfied, number 1, to the most satisfied, right? So the higher number is what they feel that they are satisfied with, right? And number 1 is safety and comfort, their ability to get there safely, most people walking, of course, and biking. Least, down at 2.8, the bottom 2 are what kind of caught our attention, where they truly are talking about the condition of the facilities in the park and the types of facilities that are in the park. Down at the 2.8, right? So we're looking at, you know, somewhere between dissatisfied and feeling neutral about it. So that, as designers and looking at this study, catches our attention right away. Next slide. All right, what were the improvements that they specifically were looking for? And this is where they wrote in as well. Bathrooms, and if you could look at it, the way I wrote it was left-hand side and flowing to the right was the quantity of mentions, and then over to the right. So bathrooms, fixing dated equipment, playground surface, a couple of security issues. Kids can run out into the street, was what they were saying in some of those responses. Things for not active recreation folks to do at the park. Field maintenance, there's flat spots, it's wet, blah, blah, blah. Walking trails, shade trees and plantings. Ecological considerations. Court areas, we still had some of the tennis players and pickleball people who really liked it. That's right. Quite a few mentions of traffic too. I mean, it certainly is not improvements needed, but people who wanted to mention that people speed, people aren't watching at stop signs, need more enforcement. It's a place for people to kind of write. That's the other thing about giving people, they can write questions that really don't, or answers that don't even have anything to do. That doesn't, no surprise. Dog areas. Dog areas come up in all the questions as well. Not quite to the extent that I thought, really. I think maybe people understand the space requirements for dog areas, so maybe people are already understanding that. My favorite question, 22, what do you love about Narberth? And this is where, even with numbers that they're putting about what they're satisfied or dissatisfied with, they just gushed about Narberth Park. They really did. The height of the letters is what gives you the quantity of how many times these words are mentioned. These word clouds are kind of fun, but those were the 2 words. They love it. It's a community place. They love to go there. They love to see people there. They love to watch people there. All the things that their kids can do, see other kids. It's a beloved spot. End of statement. That's great. Next one, let's move on to Elm Grove now. If you remember, we asked them to select of those pictures what most represented their vision for Elm Grove. Now we have to switch our numbers again. So the most desirable, meaning the lowest number, represents what was the most favorite. So look at that, that's right in the middle. That is pollinator meadows and habitat boxes, right? But really, you know, the 4 images, we didn't have an image for the late nature and learning trail, but all of them in that mid to high 3 levels. So you can kind of see that they are all focusing on a natural space at Elm Grove. That's plain to anyone who's looking at those results. And then why did you pick those images, right? Quietness, access to the stream. We would love kids to be able to experience some of that with some nature education. access to and through the water, nature play. There's not many places for that in Narberth, and they feel that this is a great place to have that. So traffic on Wynwood is a consideration, right? And noise. So when we get into the concepts, I'll let Michelle talk more about how we could address those issues. But this one really very specifically did resonate as a pretty naturalized space. Next one. On to Station Square. Currently, how do you use Station Square? And the farmers market is up at over 55%. Parking, many of the written comments are, I just kind of walked through it. There wasn't, sitting relaxing, training, gathering, socializing. Let's move on to the next one, Michelle. Right. And I have to say, before I started about question 25 and 28, as I poured through it, knowing how much work was done in that first visioning study for squaring the circle, the people who responded to this, maybe its reasoning is that they had participated previously in that study. But what I could see in the answers to this is that no one can see much creatively past, it's very impervious, there's not much there to see, there's not enough shops, we kind of like having the ability to park there, what's going to happen to the businesses if we take the parking. We weren't seeing like, wow, creative generated ideas, Michael, for that space. Although they did mention places they liked for squares, community squares. But when asked in question 28 about the fact that there was an option in the previous study for a strictly pedestrian space, strong support for that. Yes, yes, yes. But it was always almost with, but can it happen? There's so much that goes on there. So that's just my interpretation of all the feelings as I watched those responses come in on the survey. Next. At that point, so that's going to be it. Let me answer any questions you have about the survey. Obviously, this is going to keep going. Michael?
I feel like
so you have
the Elm Grove one, I feel like that's actually flipped. Because if I feel like they gave a score, like they re-ranked the score when they give the score over here. Because if you look in where they're ranking the most desired ones.
So they're giving, right, so they're averaging though, right? So the numbers that they're giving here and that is averaging.
Right. But I feel like it doesn't make sense. So if you think about it, right, if pollinators is theoretically the highest one, but then you look at it, it has the lowest levels of most desired and highest levels of least desired. So I feel like they took, SurveyMonkey's already taken that data and re-ranked it to be the reverse, I feel like.
We'll double check.
So I would say take a look at that.
Yeah, because I know they do change things periodically, and those ranking ones are always weird because it's a different scale than what we usually do with dissatisfied, dissatisfied.
Right.
So we'll double check that and make sure.
Thank you. Yep, definitely check that. I think when you look at it though, the same sentiment kind of applies. One of the things I think that's important, there's a nature-based play was a word that we used. Nature-based play is still a constructed playground. You are constructing natural elements to play on, like stones and trails and rocks and boulders and tree trunks and things like that. But it's still a constructed space versus playing in nature, right? So we're clear on that, right? So that there was a feeling that maybe the older kids that aren't served by the playground would like nature-based play at Elm Grove. But I want us to be kind of clear that that is different than strictly just allowing people to interact with nature. So, great. Thank you. I'll definitely get back to you tomorrow on that. Any other questions on the survey or the KPIs? Great. Little update. We did get the skate park. We have the farmers market I mentioned is going to be included for sure. What else? I don't think so. I think things are moving along. I think the annual park users, this is a tough time. I almost wanted to go over to the basketball court and see if I could find our folks from that But I'm sure it's a busy time, but.
When basketball's over, they'll be happy to talk to you.
Exactly. Great. All right, I'm gonna pass it over to Sarah for the analysis.
So we're gonna start off with kind of the township-wide analysis that I think we had these at the public meeting. So again, this is just our kind of site map, and then you can also see the hydrologies pulled out on this as well with the floodplain. But kind of looking at the three main parts that we're focusing on. And then we also, last time we had shown you the elevation map. So again here, the darker, the lower it is. So everything kind of coalesces down into our main heart of the study area with Narberth Park and Elm Grove. Even the Station Square is kind of at that lower point within the borough itself, in that darker color. We also started to pull together what we like to call kind of a circulation map. So this is kind of looking at regional road networks. So, you know, the redder, darker are our major kind of state routes, US interstates. Orange is more of those major roads. Yellow, we're kind of calling collector roads in terms of like how are people going through Narberth, where is everything funneling into? And then we kind of have our local roads, and we even have a few alleyways in there as well. So kind of getting an understanding of where the major corridors are through, and then also starting to look at where proposed and existing trails and bike facilities are as well. And then also kind of obviously we all understand that the train creates a divide with Narberth, so that's displayed on here. So we started to also look at some feasibility things in terms of how that train kind of intersects and separates Narberth from Elm Grove. So can we go next? And, you know, there's been a lot of ideas that have been discussed about how can we make those pedestrian connections. So, you know, one is looking at that East Indian Creek culvert. So we did based off of so there was a mapping of the floodplain when that site was potentially going to be redeveloped. So we have very clear understanding of the floodway through there. That's current information. So you kind of see that 100-year flood water level that's drawn, and then we've estimated the culvert, kind of looking at the coursing of the stone, and have an estimated height of about 9 feet on that culvert from the stream bottom up to the top of the culvert. So what you can see here is we have about 4.5 feet of clearance between our 100-year storm flood and the top of the culvert. So when you start to think about putting a structure in there, there's some basic best practices. One is you want kind of a 1 foot minimum between the bottom of your structure and the 100-year floodway. And that's the minimum, because you have to think there's the potential for large debris to go through there, that you don't want to knock your structure and lose the investment, and you also don't want to trap debris in there. So that's kind of that 1 foot minimum. And then structures typically have about a 2 foot depth, right? So that's going to be all your sub-decking that supports whatever grading you put through there. So that starts to really diminish the amount of clearance we would have for an actual walkway. So we really don't feel that it's a feasible proposition to try to put something through there with where the 100-year floodplain is going through that culvert. And just the next slide kind of looks at it from the other side. Again, you kind of have the same condition from the other side. Not much is changing, it's pretty level through there. Just here you kind of have the whole obstacle of how do you get from the street down to the level. So it gets even more complicated on this side in terms of how to make that connection. But again, I think it's pretty, I mean, there could be a more accurate measuring of it to really say this isn't an option, but it's our point at this point that it's not something worth pursuing. So then you kind of get looking at, okay, what are other options? Like we really need a safe connection. There's always the option of looking at an additional tunnel parallel to the vehicular tunnel, right? Again, this is a really big improvement. The funding for these types of improvements are prioritized, and you have to kind of weigh out any other alternatives before you pursue this. So with looking at kind of where we are at Station Square and kind of having that be a priority both for multimodal as well as emergency services, that kind of outweighs maybe the priority of having a pedestrian tunnel at this end of the township. I think there's other things that we can start to look at in terms of, is there additional signalization that can happen at the tunnel that maybe, because you have the one signal on the south side now, is there one on the north side that then you can kind of control and have a pedestrian cycle that goes through the tunnel, right? Do you get a signal on both sides? So that kind of gets into a whole traffic, but I think that's kind of to really make a safe kind of pedestrian walkway through there that's ADA width, you would kind of need to cut into the cartway. To do that, you have to tunnel down to either one lane, so that you're alternating cycles. So it's a whole traffic study in itself to see if that's even feasible. That would be kind of outside, but that's kind of the direction that it's looking like would make the most sense to really do any sort of pedestrian improvements through that area. Not great news, but that's kind of our initial analysis.
Were you looking just right adjacent to that Wynwood Tunnel, or were you also looking at other options? Because there's also a closed-off pedestrian tunnel at Dudley Avenue.
Yeah, it was funny, we were just looking at the maps here, and that probably was originally a sewer right-of-way of some sort, because if you look at this map over here, it actually shows a waterway going through there. So that would require multiple easements through multiple properties. You could talk to the landowners and see if they're open to that idea, but
It's never been used as a walkway from my checking with some older folks that have been lifelong 70-year residents.
yeah.
They say, oh yeah, I know that thing's there, but no, nobody ever used that as a walkway.
Yeah, I think it was a drainage, as much as it looks like a walkway, because it's not conveying water, I think it was there for drainage.
So, did one of the options you said would be to cut into the existing tunnel versus making a new tunnel?
So,
Like making that sidewalk wider? Is that
yeah, I don't know.
more feasible than digging a whole new hole?
I think it's more feasible to dig a new bore than to expand an existing bore. As counterintuitive as that seems,
Well, he's an architect, you're an expert, right?
Yeah.
I
mean,
don't know.
Drill a new tunnel.
Drill a new tunnel.
Drill a new
Yeah.
tunnel.
Don't mess with the existing.
Yeah.
You know, they went under the English Channel by drilling a new tunnel.
yeah,
The Swedes have done it, you know, that's what Norwood should do. That stone structure is a beautifully made, massive arch. It was a cut and cover, actually. Built the stonework, and then they filled in on top when they built the embankment. And the forces, the stresses on that arch are enormous. Don't mess with it. You know, it's like.
He's right. I think really the question is if you're going to attempt an underpass anywhere under that railroad in Narberth, you really pick your site carefully. There's a lot of different considerations. Because the borough did go through some of those ideas in the grant applications for funding, right? And we thought that was a good case to be made because the alignment on Maple,
Essex.
which is it?
Essex.
Essex, yeah, so on Essex, it was originally identified by the railroad as an underpass, number one. Number two, it was right adjacent to the station. And the headroom that we had measured at the feasibility level would allow for some kind of service vehicles as well for emergency and also ped bike connection to get from north to south. So there was a lot of reasons why that location made enough sense to try to go after money. I think you need to weigh those considerations every other place and think about it.
Another way to think about it is pick the center of mass of occupancy, of residences and occupancy on one side, and the center of mass of the residents on the other side, and draw a line between them. That's where your tunnel should be. Because the goal is not to get emergency vehicles through there, no. It's to get moms and strollers and shopping carts through there. That's the goal.
That's the primary.
So that people can get, so that people can get from the south side where my daughter now lives, God bless her, to the playground
That's right.
without going through Arkansas,
Yeah.
which is what we have to do now.
And so I think in the point of kind of presenting these different analysis and focusing in on Windward underpass is, one is just due diligence to say, look, there's a couple options. We want to make sure they're all on the table and that we acknowledge that they're options. But it really, when you start to look at something like a new bore, a new tunnel, like you start to have to look at where your priority is to put something like that. Does it make sense to put it on the edge, or does it make sense to put it in the middle? And whereas I think the instinct is here is like, well, we have 2 parks, we want to connect them directly, but it might not be the best place to invest in that
And
level
there's one
of
other
infrastructure.
consideration too, and that's like who would fund it. So if you're thinking that Amtrak would fund it, that's probably not going to happen.
You can't
If you're
get
thinking of the federal
Yeah, we
government,
can't get, let's get that first
under the
bridge.
bipartisan infrastructure law, might fund it, but they have a very, very detailed criteria of competition that each project competes against. So Jim's point about who does it serve, how many does it serve, comes into play right away about what they would fund. So this one would be mostly loop walk, connecting 2 parks. The other one has all kinds of different uses. So those are different criteria that are used by funding agencies.
If we were to, I mean, it just seems like trying to build something on that end, and I would love it because I'm right at that end, but it just seems like that's the money, the time, I mean, it would be a 15-year plan in order to get something if we were lucky. But, and I don't know anything about what's going on with that whole bank of buildings that I know are going to be redeveloped and the parking lot behind that.
The 3.
Yeah, I mean, is there any
230.
sense of turning part of that into like a nice walkway, pathway that leads through that part of through the business section, but away from all the traffic, and then just connecting it to this road, to make it something pretty that people will walk, like people want places to walk, and could that be the
Are you
connector
talking
from
about 230 Narberth?
the bridge? Yeah, what is that
230
thing?
Haverford?
Yeah, is it Haverford Avenue where?
So one of the elements that was in the grant application, one got funded, one grant application didn't get funded, was to see how you would connect down from the bridge
Yeah,
on both sides of the
and make it
railroad.
pretty.
It could look good as well as be ADA accessible and be your alternate route.
Right.
I mean, the movements from the station platforms in that direction, they serve a number of different neighborhoods, right? But they also serve the people who need ADA access to get from one platform to the other to get home. If they come here, they want to be able to get home. Right now, that can't happen. So all those things are really part of the consideration about what happens at Station Square, and we'll get into that. For this project, we're focused on recreation.
Yeah.
But there's already been enough work done at the committee level and with the grant applications to show you where those connections would work.
Because it could be nice.
And Alan, are those plans officially approved?
230.
The 230 Haverford?
Yeah, they got their land development approval.
Yeah, so the parking lot remains the same in their current land development. You'll see that as we move forward. It still doesn't, the borough still owns a strip, right? Is that, or did that change?
No, we're selling off the
You're selling,
parking lot.
okay, you're
Yeah.
selling off, okay. But I thought you had a piece of land between the parking lot and the station as well.
Possibly.
Could be.
And also for folks that are listening at home, we were required to resell the parking lot back to them, just
Yeah.
phrasing of that. So, but yes, we have rights to parking, to a certain number of parking spaces within that as
So
part of
now's the time to, if you wanted to consider something like that, to make sure the easement's in place so that those connections can be built later.
It would seem if you've already approved it after a lengthy process,
The easements.
I can't imagine you could very easily go back
Yeah, it might
to
be
the
that. We have
developer
to
and say,
work
we'd
with
like
that.
some more.
Close to.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Well, life is long, and projects have a bumpy road right to the very end. I speak from many years of experience with that. Right? So it's
Very
worth a
excited
try.
about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean,
It's just-
it is an interesting idea. It was explored in the Station Square study, so that idea does exist out there. But, so we'll keep going, so we're gonna dive a little more into the site-specific analysis, so looking at Elm Grove, we do have our slope analysis, so again, obviously we have the steep slopes coming off of the right-of-way, there's a little bit of the level area closer to the Windward Tunnel that feels like part of the park, probably is technically part of the right-of-way, so we should kind of keep that in mind sometimes as we're moving forward. And then we do have in yellow is kind of that, mid-range slope, not considered a steep slope, but still some grade, so that's where that lawn kind of naturally tears down to the floodplain area along the stream. So that's what you're seeing in yellow. And then we kind of have a composite analysis where we kind of put all the information together and start to think about what are the critical things. So here you're kind of seeing where there's on-street parking shaded in yellow. We've kind of estimated the counts of parking. That's less important here. It gets more important in some of the other side analysis. And the little blue dots and lines, that's your sewer system. Looking at the heavy line that's dashed, that's the culverted coming through and kind of representative of how large that culvert is. And then we open up into the stream, which you lose a little bit right along the property line there. There's a solid blue line, and then you're seeing that floodplain. And this is, it does dominate the site. And then we have some existing trees there, which are obviously in lawn condition now, which isn't quite represented on the aerial. And then in hot pink, we're seeing our sidewalks and crosswalks, traffic lights and all of that as well. So I'm going to hand off to Jessie to talk a little bit about kind of her observations. Jessie Buckner did our ecological analysis for both sites.
Sorry, I was a few minutes late. I'm a functional ecologist, restoration ecologist. I have a background in aquatic ecology, but also urban spaces. And right now we're looking at these, more residential, urban, technically parks. They're smaller spaces, and when you see those, it's hard to think of, oh, this is an ecological space. We have to think about that all of these spaces do have their own ecology. Even the most, concrete space that you can think of is going to have its own biome of, insect level, temperature, chemistry, all these things are interacting all the time. So as we are kind of moving into a time where people are more conscious of the ecological aspects and you live in this beautiful green town, what are the ways to enhance that? And we have these two, I didn't really look at Station Square, but I was really looking at Elm Grove and Dunbar Park specifically. So just starting with Elm Grove Park, because that's where we are right now. This one looks much more native, looks more naturalized, but most of the species that are in there right now are considered invasive species. That's really common in any urban area, but you have the road, you have the stream running through, you have the train, you have literally every seed source that's going to bring those invasive species in possible. And one way to think about the invasive species is that they do provide a structure. It's not like you're going to walk into any of these spaces and it's going to be devoid of life. But if you think of the health of the things that are using these spaces, the birds, the animals, the insects, the pollinators, they are looking for a healthy meal, and what they have there is a McDonald's. So they're going to get fed, but it's not really going to give them the quality of life, the quality of offspring, things that they need. And especially here in Philly, we are right along the Atlantic Flyway. Even if this isn't host to a lot of really, really unique or rare breeding birds, you could have the potential, if this area were to be a little bit more naturalized, to have some really unique visiting birds. And this could be a location for birders to come. Just in general, it would improve the health of the area, it would improve the health of the lawns. You think about it as kind of stepping stones. So when we live in these urban spaces, think about the magnitude. We're not in a 2,000 acre park right now, but if you can have these little spaces, they also act as examples for the neighbors around them. So that's kind of just my spiel on the importance of the ecological, that right now we're looking at it and there's not as much ecological value. And I'll get to the concepts when we get to that point, but kind of just the current condition, we have this stream that has been walled in on both sides, so that's really impairing the functionality of it. You have the culverts. It's just so manipulated in so many ways that currently it's really not supporting much benthic macroinvertebrates. So sort of the insect life, the mussels. Philly used to have a huge population of native mussels that would be cleaning this water for you. They're not able to exist in a space like this anymore. So there's just a lot of impairments to any type of biological life that's existing here. It's still providing some, spiritual passive recreation, but there's ways that it could be really improved. Even the lawn spaces here, there's a lot of new information about, low mow grasses, or more nativized grasses, and mixes of cool season and warm season. And right now you have kind of this cool season lawn grass with invasives. So not really providing much as far as your ecosystem services. Even with erosion, getting a better mix of plants in there would really help ground the soil that's in there and clean up that stream a little bit more, and also just help with flooding. So yeah, right now there's also the flooding issues. So that's kind of the Elm Grove.
We'll put a smile on that in a little bit. Okay, so, no, that was.
Make bad news sound.
Looking at Narberth Park, so again, obviously we have a pretty level park here, majority of it is the playfields. We do have, looking at Wynwood Ave, you have the War Memorial up there, so you kind of have the slope coming off of that, which you're seeing in orange. Another thing, we didn't do a soil map for this. All of Narberth is urban soil, if you weren't aware. So it's all been greatly disturbed. So, it's all one soil class throughout the whole borough. Looking at the composite here, so we really here we have a lot more information because we want to make sure we call out all the existing facilities that we have in the park, showing kind of the representative tree coverage. Obviously, we have the floodplain. Coming north of Windsor, you have a convergence of a pipe stream from the, west, converges with the east. So that floodplain does kind of widen out here. So that's where you're seeing that much wider floodplain that goes all the way, the library sits within the floodplain itself. Covers the tennis courts, and then it kind of necks back down as it comes down into the Haverford underpass. I'm trying to think. Here we do call out parking a little bit more. So, we do have the municipal lot. I think we estimated about 45 cars can park in there. That might be less or more depending on how people choose to park through there. And then we have, technically parking's allowed on the north side of Haverford Ave. We do know people park on the south side, but that would be unofficial parking. And then Windsor Ave, you have parking on the one block that would be permitted on the south side, and then it opens up to parking on both sides as you continue east into town. And then also just kind of looking at directional, so we do have that one-way road on Haverford, and then all our sewer drains kind of converge into the underpass as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else here. I'll kind of pass over to Jessie then to kind of go over her findings here. Oh, sorry, I have one more. We did do these quick section studies because we know there's been a lot of talk about how we address sidewalks, streets. So we wanted to make sure we kind of had an understanding of the base design. So this is looking through the Amtrak right-of-way. So we're looking towards Wynwood Ave. Obviously, we have utility poles that kind of fall in that right-of-way along the street. We have our drive aisle, which we're estimating around 17 feet, and then our parallel parking is estimated at 8 feet. Sidewalk is right up against the road, under 5 feet wide, and then we kind of have a little bit of a verge before you get to kind of the fence for the basketball court. The section goes to the basketball court. And that's a pretty typical condition along there. I think the sidewalk is uniform in width along there, and sometimes you have fencing, sometimes it opens up right into the park, depending where you are. If you're at the basketball court, baseball field, or if you're kind of in the middle, then there's no fence. Go next. And then looking at Windsor Ave, again, kind of looking in the same direction there. This actually goes through the cross section or crosswalk of the street. We do have kind of 2 drive aisles through here. Parallel parkings, we're looking at the section where we only have parallel parking kind of on the one side. And then right at the stream culvert, the sidewalk does widen out, so we kind of have that 5-foot landing is really where kind of 2 sidewalks intersect, because one is right up against the road where the other is offset from the road. And then on the park side, here on this side, the sidewalk gets a little smaller, we're right around 4 feet. Again, we're dealing with utility poles, trees that have been planted along that right away as well. They're pretty mature trees, but young. I would say they were planted within the last 10 years, if I had to guess. Maybe a little older, maybe 20 years. And then we open up into the park itself. And again, like at the playground, we have a fence. I think when we get to the baseball field, we have fencing again, but actually the fence is all the way along, right? Windsor has the fence all the way along.
They're just things.
Yeah. So we just kind of want to make sure, and what we'll do is we start to explore ideas about traffic calming or crosswalk improvements or bike lanes, things like that. We'll start to kind of take these as the baseline and kind of say, how does that change the road? Like, is there room to add things from traffic calming or pedestrian? Like, is there a way to widen the sidewalk? And we'll start to look at how that affects utilities, trees, usable park area. That will be kind of the purpose of these studies moving forward. Now,
Yeah. I mean, this one, you look at it and this one is hyper developed at this point, it's lawn, it's playgrounds. I was looking into the history of it, and you probably all know this, but it was a lake. And they kind of ironically named it Crystal Lake, kind of the wishful thinking, because apparently it was actually more like a wetland swamp situation that was in this whole area. And they're like, well, what if we name it Crystal Lake? It'll be more appealing. Until they decided to just, pipe Crystal Lake entirely in 1895. So it's actually a pretty historic piping. A lot of the culverts that we see kind of came about during transportation in 50s, 60s, 70s. So actually to have one that's this old is kind of a unique feature, but that also means that there probably are issues with it, as well constructed as things were at that point. So I think there's a lot to think about of, it seems like a very heavy lift to try to daylight this stream, but as far as your maintenance options, it's something you might need to start considering anyway. I mean, at this point, you're experiencing flooding, but you have this park, you have all these usable things, and Simone Collins has come up with all of these really amazing ideas of ways that this can be redone. So I feel like there's more to say kind of in the concept section, but what you have right now is a very, very anthropogenic space, and there are ways to make it more naturalized, but obviously there's, you need to keep those recreational factors. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But I think the big thing that was talked about earlier is, again, coming back to all of the transport that's happening around. So you have a lot of input, whether that's the stormwater, the pollution, everything's coming off of the train tracks. There's the air pollution that comes just from the creosote and everything that's landing in these spaces. So that's kind of also affecting what's there, and also the possibility of what can be there.
And it was a dump too, by the way.
Missed that in my reading.
Between it being a lake and being a baseball field, it was a dump. People have found things like toilets buried in the ground and bed frames and stuff like that on both sides of Windsor Avenue.
That was a useful use for wetlands back then.
Yeah. You throw a bed in there and it just sort of disappears.
are we on till 8:30, is that, or do we have till 9?
Go until 9.
Okay, till 9, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. We will kind of, so I think again, obviously we have our slopes for our town square, relatively level. Obviously we have to transition up to the train stations, that's where you're seeing steep slopes. Good next. We have trees there, we have parking, we kind of overlaid the new building footprint for, I always want to say 320, 230 Haverford, and then we're showing our crosswalks, stormwater, piping, things again as well on this. So again, just kind of zooming in on there, kind of seeing how cars are entering that space as well, so keep going. So what we did is, we have the concept we originally had, kind of overlaid that, looking at a little larger study area, because I think, again, when we look at the scale of the site, it's really important to understand what's happening at Narberth Ave, and then kind of what's happening as you go out of town towards Narberth Park. So we're looking at kind of a larger area, and then obviously we kind of want to zoom in on that as well, to really be able to understand what's going on. So, this is going to be the starting point of our discussion, this is where we got to as a preferred alternative in the original study. So kind of looking at, and what this concept does, it provides for all the ways to get people to the train, under the train, in an accessible way, in the most kind of compact way. So that's kind of the starting point, but what we really want to explore with the public is this square, right? What really happens there? What are the next level of amenities that we want to explore? How does the farmer's market really function in this square? How does a festival function in the square? And really start to dive into what are the program opportunities that people see and what site furnishings, artwork, amenities they want to see to support those programs.
Sarah?
Yeah.
I'd just like to get it on record and remind everybody that this was one of two concepts that was developed for Station Square during the visioning process. Because it was uncertain what was going to happen at 2:30, and because people were concerned about access to the rear of 2:30, we were asked to do two. One space, the square would be completely pedestrian, and recreation and civic uses. And this one, which would have an egress from 2:30. So this is the one in general that reflects the land development for 2:30.
And then if you go to the next, we also, just because this got brought up in conversation, but obviously during the 2:30 land development plan, they showed the turning motion in and out. So it does, because that's one thing with fire trucks and things, have to be able to get behind that building in an emergency. So this is kind of that study that they prepared showing that the turning radiuses do work. I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind as we move forward is, so if you look at the one, if they're coming, west and turning in, a lot of the concept here was everything was a flush curve, right? So where it looks like they're going over a curve, the intent was that to all be flush as you kind of come through here. So where there's going to be definitions of how residential vehicle might pull out of that area and what they would do, it would still accommodate the turning motion that a fire truck might need to get into there.
Are you saying that there's no actual curb?
That was the majority of this design, was that there would be no curb. So it was kind of,
Like the Wonder concept?
yes, so kind of the European. So that's why we have an alley of trees on either side, and there would be other supporting site furnishings on each side that defines the vehicular path, and there would be a change in pattern. There might even be a flush curve to really delineate it, but there's no, for a person walking through, there's no obstruction. So it kind of gives priority to the pedestrians walking through. So that treatment was also applied to Haverford, so that both sides of the business street would kind of bleed into one. So when you shut down the road during a festival, the concept was this is all one public plaza, and there's no curb to step down, step up.
So on the street as well?
Yep.
There's no curb there?
That was the concept that was
The
pursued here.
treatments weren't selected, but the design allows for a number of options, including fixed bollards, movable bollards, and other kinds of delineators. So
And it allows for
this
more
was
flexibility?
this was more geometric and not yet into the final design.
With regard to the approval of 230, was there any agreement with the developer that would allow that egress from the parking lot that the developer will now own, so that they would, his commercial and tenants are gonna, it's gonna still have a driveway of some sort egress-wise, I presume?
Yeah, it's approved plan, so this is, yeah, we'd have to work with this, like how they're showing it here.
Okay, that's why I was wondering if that was one of the two designs you have, but this is
This is
the one
the
that's gonna work, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't there another way in? I thought,
So if you go back to the overall plan, Michelle.
You go in by,
So they
where
come,
rivals used to be.
right,
yeah, are they coming in here?
So it's a one-way around?
Yeah.
that's between the buildings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that space was gonna get, is gonna
Right
get
about new building.
slightly
Yeah,
larger.
sorry. There is an existing building here, so I thought it was right here.
So it's one way in near Revivals, I'll still call it that, and then you go around and the exit is out near where
You
the.
get in the same way you
spaces.
get in now,
Yeah, it's just gonna be more
though
generous.
it's a little wider.
Yeah.
And right now, it's tight.
Yes.
It's frightening for pedestrians, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And there'll be an additional pedestrian ingress and egress out of the.
Out of Epic.
So I do want to keep moving forward because we want to get into the fun part of this. So I'll kind of go through the program elements. I don't want to spend a lot of time here because I want to give Michelle a lot of time to go through the concepts, but I think it's important to kind of talk about why we decided to show what we're showing in here. Next. So kind of looking based off of kind of the public meeting, feedback from the survey, and then also just kind of looking at what's appropriate, what's suitable. So like one of the things we looked at, you know, dog park didn't get a lot of sway on the survey, but it comes up a lot. You know, to build a dog park, at the minimum you need 2 acres. That gets worn out really quickly, so we recommend kind of 3 acres as a starting point for a dog park. Narberth Park is 6.25 acres, that's half your park. So you know, a dog park isn't really a feasible amenity you can offer, right? So that's when we kind of say what's feasible, kind of what we recommend. It's not our personal preference, it's just what the site can accommodate. So you can see we have a very long list at Narberth Park, right? A lot of this is existing things that you already accommodate there, such as the basketball courts. You have your skate park, which is there. You have soccer, football fields, and then also softball, baseball fields, all kind of in a multi-field layout. Things that people have kind of asked for that we see are common trends throughout the community would be kind of a walking path type trail through a larger park. We've heard about, you know, the idea that older people are looking for activities. So we kind of looked at the idea of an outdoor fitness area. This is, instead of like a fitness trail where it gets strung out, it's kind of more of a small compact area. It can have equipment that appeals to both teenagers and seniors. A lot of times you'll see them close to a playground, but kind of separate, so that there's generational interactivity going on. Also, the idea of a greenhouse came up for Elm Grove, but we don't think it's appropriate there. We think getting a building in Elm Grove would be tough, as well as getting any sort of vehicular access in and out of Elm Grove would be really difficult. But there's potential, you do have kind of the community garden, you have the library. Could we explore the idea of a greenhouse here? So we do look at that, but it might also be things that we see here, always kind of keep in your back of your head. There is Sabine Park. Are there facilities that might make sense at Sabine Park when that kind of gets explored as its own study? So I think, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces as we kind of go through these lists and think about what should be in a park. As we go through the concepts, not all of these things are going to be on every concept. So there are some decision points and kind of value. We need to determine what are the higher values, right, as a group and as a community too, as we move forward in the process. And then there's things that maybe like the pop-up space, you know, that came up a lot in the public meeting for Narberth Park. Is that something that's more appropriate to Station Square? So looking at what's the most appropriate in different areas. Elm Grove, we really feel this wants to be a passive park. I think, you know, that's what the survey is saying, that's what the analysis is saying when you look at the floodplains, the slopes, the potential for kind of a space there to serve as more habitat. So really looking at low activity programs there, you know, outdoor classroom, sensory pathway, educational gardens, and we'll show kind of, we don't have pictures of all these things, but a few of them, looking at the stream restoration. Maybe the biggest thing you put in there might be a viewing pavilion platform, like a very small area that you can get in the shade and kind of just view different aspects of the nature restoration process. And then Station Square, you know, we're a little lower here on what we're recommending because we still want to kind of get a lot more feedback specifically on this from the public, but really kind of focusing on the idea of programming what happens there and then what are the amenities people want to see there.
I think when I was looking through the responses as well for Narberth Park, I felt like I saw a lot of things talking about gathering areas and like shade, both in questions about like both in terms of tree, but also like shade structures, which really resonated with me recently because it's been so hot in the summer.
And we can add that to the program list as we refine this. That definitely shows up in the concepts.
Yeah.
I forgot to add that specifically to the program list, but that's a good point. That was definitely something that came up in terms of public and survey, wanting that gathering space within Narberth Park as well. So we just have some quick kind of example images with playgrounds. You know, there's a lot of different trends with playground currently that are popular, nature-based play being one. The other kind of big trend is inclusive play. And so, you know, inclusive play doesn't just have to do with the children and how they use the playground, but also how the caregivers use the playground. So is it easy for people to walk around of all ages and abilities? Is there seating for caregivers? Is there shade? So really kind of looking at all aspects of kind of play and how people interact with playgrounds. And then also the idea of sensory play is really big too in terms of playgrounds. So we'll be kind of exploring those as we move forward. Sensory path and trails, this is something that just kind of got brought up on another project today that I thought could be relevant if we look at this on a smaller scale. Doylestown and their community park has a really great sensory path play, so that's where you're seeing some of these more built activities. But again, there's ways to interpret it in more natural materials. So this might be a small feature that finds its way into one of the parks to kind of introduce play and a different mode for people that might have auditory or kind of sensory needs. This kind of meets that as opposed to traditional playgrounds. Themed gardens, this kind of came up at the public meeting. I think it kind of rings through in a lot of the responses, but just looking at kind of macro gardens and how they can be interpreted and used as education. So these could be pollinator gardens, habitat gardens. This is a great example of kind of a bee wall that has plantings integrated into it. Stormwater as well. You know, as we start to look at how stormwater gets incorporated into these parks, I think we all want it to be beautiful and meaningful. You know, there's an art that can be created, and I think this is a great picture that kind of shows how that walkway wraps around, and there's even kind of a little amphitheater built into it. So kind of taking maybe a more structured approach to how we treat stormwater in some ways at different places. And then also the idea of kind of that sensory pathway, sensory garden, where you really focus on textures and creating a more intimate experience for all ages. Again, looking at that outdoor fitness, so again, this can appeal to all ages, teenagers to seniors. But I think the idea is kind of creating it in that pod so that it really becomes, and I think the equipment has evolved that it can do multiple things, and it really kind of is like that supplement to having a gym membership, right? It's kind of that public gym in an outdoor environment. Game courts, you know, you have kind of your little play area, basketball court next to the playground. I think that's something that is important because the larger courtyard area is dominated by kind of programming and adults. So kind of having that smaller area for younger kids to be able to play games. It also gives you the opportunity to kind of overlap things. There's different ways to kind of create this space to be more structured or less structured in terms of the types of games you want to look at. And then the skate park, again, you know, one of the things we'll be exploring is, you know, one, does the community want a permanent skate park? I think we heard clearly at the first public meeting that it is a desirable amenity to pursue. As you start to look at a skate park, you know, you have the option of doing kind of a poured-in-place concrete, like in the upper right. Below that would be kind of the prefabricated ramp systems, which have improved, but are similar to what you have there today. And then kind of looking at that left, the idea that maybe it's not just a skate park that we fence in and you go there to skate, maybe it serves more as what we kind of call a skate plaza. So this is Paynes Park, which is right below the Art Museum on the Schuylkill River Trail. It's a great example of a skate plaza where it serves as the beginning of a race, the close of the race. You know, you can have performances there, you kind of have the built-in seating, but all of this is skatable. And it kind of, people can use it either for an event or to day-to-day skating.
Where's that poured in example from?
I just grabbed that.
Because the other ones are labeled, so I just wondered.
Right.
Very observant.
You got me. Yeah. I forget where that one was from. So looking at pavilions, again, you know, one of the things we'll explore is, you know, we have two structures in the park right now. In Arbroath Park, you have your pavilion and you have your restroom. Is there a way to kind of consolidate those so that it's more meaningful? The restroom's more central. You know, right now your restroom's really far away from your playground, which is kind of usually when you're laying out a park, the first thing is, okay, playground here, restroom there. So for small children, moms, making things a little easier. Also kind of looking at, is there a way to kind of have more of a stage with a pavilion, exploring different options like that. So these are just graphical examples of how some of those things might evolve. Naturalized stream banks, we went out and looked at the kind of existing condition of the stream. The top picture is up in Narbrook, and then the bottom picture is down in Lower Marions Park. And then just some other examples of kind of that naturalization of streams and kind of that riparian buffer with some tree plantings. And so just kind of that idea of what it looks like when you start to relax back banks on a stream. I think all these are kind of in keeping with scale of the stream that we have.
Is something like that compatible with the stream play concept?
Yeah, you'll definitely, and that, I think that's the next picture is how do we get kids down to the stream, right? So these are actually both examples upstream and downstream of how people are interacting with East Indian Branch Creek. So as simple as just little stepping stones going down the bank, some really cool big boulders as we go further down. I don't know if we would encounter any of those as we start to dig around.
Those are important, I'm sure, in Short Ridge.
Those are some
They didn't grow there.
those are some big boulders at Port, unless I'm just, the scale's off on the picture. But yeah, they're huge. They do look a little like Pocono boulders. Yeah, so with that, I'm gonna pass off to Michelle, and she's gonna take us through
Any questions
some
on the
concepts.
analysis?
Yeah. No, that was a lot of information.
So if we were to naturalize the stream in Elm Grove, isn't one half of it the property of the person that the borough purchased it from?
Mm-hmm.
So we would have to get permit, if that's something that is decided on, we'd have to get permission to take the walls down from that landowner?
So there are options where we could just look at nationalizing one side, and that would be feasible. Ideally, we would want to work with the landowner and potentially come up with ways to naturalize both sides. I think as we start to look at the concepts, we'll also look at one where we're expanding the floodplain. We would only recommend expanding the floodplain into the park. Like, they have pretty immediate structures on their side where they probably don't want to encourage floodplain encroachment further into their property. So I think, there's options to explore both.
So you could, by lowering the wall on the Narborough side, you could make it so that the kids would have simpler access to the stream.
Yeah.
And it would accomplish much of what you're looking for in terms of floodplain benefit, I would think, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
One of the incentives to the adjacent landowner might be to work with the borough now, rather than having to take on remedial actions for wall failure by themselves in the future.
I was gonna say that same thing, like, when that wall falls,
It's
they are
their
responsible.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Right, so it makes sense to talk now, and see if you can work a partnership project now.
That's it.
Now, one thing in terms of initial concept, you had courts there, some kind of play court, I couldn't.
Yeah.
So I didn't see tennis courts, I didn't see pickleball.
So we didn't show pictures of everything.
I'm just wanted, I
Yeah,
know that
so
people will ask those questions,
Yeah.
and it was mentioned that it requested in the survey, so I'm just trying to.
Yeah, so the courts didn't come up high on the survey. Like, I think when you're going through like tennis, obviously there are people that are still advocates for tennis. It wasn't something that came up a lot. Same with pickleball, actually. I think, with both of those facilities, tennis is always a hard one because once there is an existing tennis court, there's ownership over it. It is, well, this might be an old fact, so maybe it's not so current, but it is the largest facility. And it's a very expensive facility to build for the number of people it serves at a time, right? So on a tennis court, you have 4 people, it's 60 feet by 120 feet, and it's really expensive to build. So it's like one of the most expensive recreation facilities you can put in for the demographic or for the number of people it can serve. Not to say they're not important, but I think it's valuable to say, because I think when you look at Narberth as a community and you have your 4 open public space parks, what facilities do we need to meet the demand and also to meet what the community wants. So when you look at Narberth Park, you already have a 90-foot baseball field, which is a regional facility. Either the tennis court or the skate park could kind of be viewed as a regional facility in terms of it's going to draw more people than just in Narberth. So I think we'll look a little closer at where the closest tennis courts are. I can look at Lower Merion. I'm assuming they have.
Well, so actually, like, and that was one of the things that I noticed was in like the ranking of like the parks that folks use, right? It was like Narberth
Yeah.
Park was obviously number 1. Station Square was number 2. And then Shortridge and General Wayne were right after that. And then like Sabine was later on the list. But like General Wayne Park, which is one of the ones that like folks rank pretty highly as used, has existing tennis facilities. And it is right down the road.
And
from
then
us.
in the opposite direction, South Ardmore also, I think, has 8 courts.
Yeah.
It's a 5-minute car ride, so.
I know the survey indicated that the older folks get the least benefit,
Right.
and, and they're the ones, what you're saying to them, well, you gotta get in a car if you wanna go to a park. If you don't provide something for them here. Was there anything in the surveys that said we want a bunch of these exercise stations that we can work out?
So that didn't come up specifically in the survey, but that is so we're taking that from kind of the state survey. So Pennsylvania does what they call the SCORP, and it's every year they issue or every 5 years, what are the trends in recreation within the state. So, and also kind of talking to park and rec managers, because we do a lot of park comp plans, that is something that a lot of people are looking for that does serve a large demographic. We were hoping with the walking trails as well, that's the number 1 thing asked for in all communities. It's no surprise that it came up high on your survey too. So that's kind of reaching out to that older demographic, as well as we thought the greenhouse was a really unique thing. That was an idea that came out of the survey as well. I think pickleball, again, when you look at the trend of pickleball, and I play it with my friends, it's a great sport, I love it. You don't just have one pickleball court. You want to have at least 6, because if you have 4, it's not enough. So when you talk about, take 2 tennis courts is basically, if you're gonna max it out, it could be 8 pickleball courts. That's a really tight max out of pickleball and tennis. It's nonstop. It's from 8 o'clock in the morning till whenever the lights go off. Constant pickleball, and it's a regional destination. You will have people from multiple neighborhoods all coming in to use that pickleball court.
Did you know that it's louder than a skate park? I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to be funny, but it is louder than a skate
The
park.
courts I played on had sound barriers, and the township finally closed them because there were so many complaints. So, again, I think it's a great facility. I don't think it belongs in every park. And you're in a park where you have a lot of adjacent neighbors, that I think pickleball would be, just offering kind of one single pickleball court where maybe a kid could play a pickup game, and it's not going to be a destination because the chances of it being open for someone who's looking to play with their 5 friends is slim. That might be something that you explore, but even that might get pushed back from neighbors.
I'd like to throw one other thing out too. Anita and I are working in a borough about this size as Milford Borough up in Pine County, up above the waterhead, right? Really beautiful borough too. Everybody,
Beautiful.
same kind of community, everybody's really into doing things. And so when we did the comprehensive plan there, we came up, and they're limited. They can't add new park space. It's very difficult to add new park space. And one of the things that all demographic ages like is walking. But if you add a walking loop inside their existing parks, you're just going around in a circle, right? So the idea is, how do we expand that to maybe a half mile or a mile loop using the other public spaces that we have, which are rights of way, right? So they already have the bones of that, missing sidewalk sections, but a lot of good sidewalks. And they have, in the comprehensive plan, we came up with a strategy for a walking loop that's a mile, that hits all of the parks in the center of town. Right? So you reconceive those sidewalks as a primary walking loop that takes recreation back out into the borough streets. You focus your improvements there, and it supports other things in places like transportation safety and even stormwater. Because where you want to create bump outs, let's say, across the street, that gives you opportunity to capture and retain some stormwater. So I'd like to just throw that out there because you have 3 parks in a loop that has a couple sections missing. But it would give you a longer walking loop, and if you made it inviting, then that may be an activity where you visit all 3 parks in one trip.
I think even the borough of Jenkintown, they have signage for their running club that directs you on kind of, I think it's probably a 5K through Jenkintown. Is something also to kind of look at.
And the walking, the other thing that stuck out to me when I was looking at the discussions in here of like the walking paths that were desired, where there seemed to be a number of ones that stuck out to me about accessibility, which then I realized, because when I was going through it the other day, I realized, if you have mobility issues, even just like getting to the bathrooms from across, it's probably not the easiest thing to do. And so I guess that tied kind of in my head into the conversation about walking paths, older folks especially, or folks who have different ability needs.
And so far, all the efforts centering around Station Square and mobility and access there have been focused on transportation elements. But if all of a sudden they're reconceived to include recreation elements, you broaden the potential for funding sources. And DCNR has been forced to recognize that urban municipalities don't have a lot of the same options as rural municipalities. So you have to be able to invest in those other public spaces that are just dedicated for recreation. So if you keep that in mind, it may be more incentive to put your partnerships together to fix the access at Station Square. So that works.
I think the walking, our sidewalks, in my mind, need to be expanded. We need more room to be able to walk, for sure. In terms of the access to make the connection to all the parks, which would be wonderful, you run up against walking through that tunnel.
Yeah.
And that's...
You're going to have a new bridge.
Yeah, I was thinking a bridge over.
When?
2027.
I think just
For the record.
for time, I do want to give Michelle, because I think we're talking about a lot of things that are going to come up in concepts. So I do want to make sure we give time to actually get into the concepts.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want me to slide advance for you? Good.
I think I can just reach over here. Maybe I can't. There we go. All right, so we're going to show you concepts for Elm Grove Park and Dartmouth Park because we showed you the schematic design for Town Square that was previously developed. So the approach we took was that the first concept of the series is a little, it's a lighter approach, whereas the progressive concepts kind of have a little more of a more intensive, I guess, approach. But so this is kind of a minimal approach where we propose, let's see, I'll just start from the top down. So the majority of the site would be converted to an upland meadow. And then as you work down slope, it would transition into more of a wet meadow, and then eventually the riparian buffer, which is within the floodplain. And throughout the site, that yellow line indicates a walking path. And let's see, this concept shows 2 points of entry into the park on either end along Wynwood Road. And here we, this concept shows the existing sidewalk remaining, but then a fence between that sidewalk and the interior path. Let's see, also in this concept, if you look down at the bottom there, you can see that we propose access to the water through boulders through the riparian buffer down to the stream.
And at the very southern tip of the park, there's a portion where the sidewalk kind of comes in, right? So we propose just turning that into a BMP.
Into a what?
A stormwater best management practice, such as a bump out, similar to that. Giving a little bit of a buffer between pedestrians and the traffic, right where the bridge crosses the stream from Elmwood to Wynwood. We propose in both concepts making improvements to that pedestrian bridge. It remains solely pedestrian, but creating ADA access across the bridge. And then on the Elmwood Ave side, at the very end of the street, we propose implementing some of those improvements, such as plantings, the riparian buffer, and creating a little bit of an arrival point to that crossing. Let's see, I think I pretty much covered everything on this concept. It's pretty simple. So here, thank you. So here, once again, the yellow indicates walking paths, but one big difference in this concept is that here we propose replacing the existing sidewalk with a 10-foot green verge to create a buffer between the sidewalk and the traffic on Wynwood Road, pulling that walkway in, widening it to maybe 10 feet, just to create a more pleasant walking experience along the road there. In that verge would be fencing and street trees, which would also serve as traffic calming elements. Trees definitely do calm traffic and indicate that they just define the space. So then in this concept, we've got one point of entry at the center there, which leads to walking paths. And you can see that green circle to the north of the site would be the outdoor classroom. So that would be an area of lawn with maybe informal seating, maybe boulder seating, maybe a seat wall, overlooking the constructed wetland and riparian zone. So here we would actually be expanding the riparian zone and expanding the floodway, basically. Creating habitat and also providing an opportunity for visitors to interact with this space, with a boardwalk and stepping stones, giving access once again down to the water, but more at the northern end of the site. We were considering also in these options where is the best point for interaction with water, right? Considering the neighbors right across the stream. I'm sure they don't want people looking in their back windows, right? So thinking about where that fits within the site. And kind of along those lines, we're also proposing some plantings within that riparian zone to kind of buffer with landscape. And in this concept, as Sarah mentioned, we proposed that viewing pavilion as well, which overlooks the wetland and all the interaction with it. And like the first concept, we proposed improvements to the bridge and at the end of Elmwood Ave. And I think I hit everything here. Oh yeah, and just where the sidewalk kind of dips in at the southern tip of the site, just continuing that verge on, keep that buffer for pedestrians. Okay. So that is Elm Grove Park.
Can I ask a
Do
quick
we want
question?
to maybe just stop on?
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
perfect,
here,
stop on,
second side.
yeah.
I just want, where's the entrance on the first concept? I see on the second concept, it's on Wynwood Road in the central,
Yes,
in
so-
the middle part.
So the first concept kind of has two entrances, one at either end. So when you're coming out of the tunnel from Wynwood, there's that kind of node there, the yellow circle, and then just north of the bridge.
The wooden bridge that you can take on Elmwood to get over to Wynwood presently, I would think the borough has the right of way with regard to that entire road. And it seems to me, I've walked it, looked at it a few times, if the new bridge, if you put a new bridge and you put it not on the side of the road it is now, but the other one, it almost feeds right in. You don't have to come out to Wynwood Road. You could literally just about walk right to the park, and it would seem to me it would be a safer way for for kids and people to get in the park instead of having it built where it is now, then you kind of come out and you come around a little bit.
You're coming out just to come back in.
And it looked to me, when I was looking at it as well, that there's a large concrete block that supports the side of the road that I'm suggesting the bridge might be better to have the bridge on that side to allow, again, the access to that park without really kind of encountering the road.
And you make a really good point. It's interesting, actually. I didn't want to say anything because we hadn't developed that, but as I think maybe you're going through the analysis, I think maybe we caught the same wave. But yeah, and I think that really has legs and is something that we would
Yeah, and I think
explore.
also, I know the borough has looked at initial plans for replacement of that bridge and also the gabions along the stream. So we do have a key person set up with Pannoni where we expect that to be one of the things we go over. So that'll probably inform kind of the final location of where the bridge.
Do we
would make
have,
most sense.
does the borough currently have engineering plans for that bridge? Oh, no, we're not at that, okay.
But there's
It is on
initial
our
I
CIP,
thought there were
our
initial
draft CIP.
concepts.
Right.
That's what we were
Initial
like,
concepts, but
okay.
Better that there's not,
Okay,
so that there can be
Yeah. Right.
synergy between what we're doing here, rather than that, and then we get into that same thing of, well, it's already been developed, it's already been approved.
Yeah.
yeah.
And do we know how much of this property where we're talking might be owned by Lower Merion? Because I think Lower Merion has a few feet.
Didn't they change,
They gave it to us.
they gave it to
Did they
us
give
in
it?
I think
so.
this process, right, of us acquiring that
If they-
space?
That's great if they
Yeah.
did, I didn't, okay.
Yeah.
But does Amtrak have any of that land right there? Like as you go on, right near the tunnel, where it's
Yeah.
still kind of overgrown?
Yeah, some of that is most likely Amtrak. I mean, we're not working off of a survey, we're working off of parcel data.
So,
But yeah, I think the bottom of the toe of slope is probably, part of that is probably within Amtrak's area.
and based on your observation or analysis of that section of it, if Amtrak gave us access to it, would that give you additional options in that space? Would you be able to do more?
I think maybe from an ecological point, yes.
Okay. Just curious.
And maybe, do you want to speak to the idea of why we're looking at mostly meadow here as opposed to treeing the whole area, things like that, or?
Yeah, so there were a couple things that got brought up. Again, this is a very small space, and I think that it's easy to want to kind of throw the kitchen sink at it. I think there was some initial conversation like, well, what if we had a forested area and a meadow area and this kind of area and all the areas in one? But when you think about, again, kind of the systemic look of who is using this space from an ecological perspective, animals have what you would call a zone of inhibition, and there's edge effect. So basically everybody wants a certain amount of space to be in. So if you give them, 10 feet of tree space, that's not going to be enough to support any number of tree birds. And same thing with meadow. Whereas if you could get all of this to be more in that meadow open space, you're more likely to attract, that clade of species. So you'll actually have a number of grassland or savanna birds that might actually use this space, especially when you have it in this kind of transitional wet zone. So kind of getting that quality over quantity going on in the space ecologically. But yeah, if there was opportunity to move into that Amtrak space, that would actually give more opportunity. Historically working with Amtrak, SEPTA, just the trains in general, there are rules to what can go into that type of vegetated right-of-way. But at the same time, it would honestly be easier for them too if you were been able to move the meadow. It'd be easier for your maintenance because then the invasives wouldn't be coming down. We already did talk about kind of putting in either a mowed or gravel kind of trench almost in between the properties, so there would be at least some slowing of the invasives just kind of coming down the hill from that. The other thing, just to kind of bring up real quick with these concepts ecologically is, I don't know, I think I looked at some of the preliminary that Pannoni has started doing the MS4 calculations for you, but there's definitely MS4 opportunities with this level of naturalization because it would be taking an amount of sediment out of your stream. It would be reducing the shear stress that's going through here. There's a lot of things that would benefit, biologically as well as the hydrologic and hydraulics of this system just by even opening one wall, if not two. So that's kind of the ecological logic behind these concepts.
For the riparian buffer, is that typically just low-lying shrubs and plants, or can it also include any trees?
So it can include some trees. I think ideally in this situation you could kind of keep some lower shrubs like sweet pepper bush, Clothyra alnifolia, like some cornus, some dogwoods. There's definitely opportunity for some. I just wouldn't want to necessarily recommend a full savanna, like planting an oak and a few extra oaks or something. But I think ideally you want to have some shade along there too. That's also going to improve the water quality a lot, just to have a few trees, and then also just having different rooting depths. You want your annuals, you want your perennials, you want kind of a mix of all these things coming in so that you're really able to kind of hold it together.
I think also just from a programmatic point of view, where we're closest to like the core house outdoor amenities such as the pool or courtyards, things like that. You might look at something like maybe we do some larger willow, like native willow or something that will give some screening effect, just so that we are kind of creating a visual buffer.
I also wanted to speak to the verge real quick also, that again, when I was talking about the edge effect, you think of kind of the things on the edge are the most likely to die in a situation. They're getting the most sun, they're getting the most wind, they're getting, whatever's coming in. So the more you can kind of layer things from out to in, you're more able to protect that space. So, and then also just from that sound pollution, animals are just as sensitive as humans are. So it kind of goes both ways, that the humans and the animals that might be enjoying the space would have a lot of benefit from that verge as well.
I just wanted to talk about that too, because architecturally, we're going from a formal verge plant, more formalized verge planting on the southwestern edge. There's ability to introduce habitat there, but also it's going to cast your shade into your space when you most need it, right? Because of where it is. Same thing with planting on the western side of the creek. It's going to start to cast shade over the creek to help keep the water temperature down. So what Jesse was describing for the creek would also work for the savanna, because you want to get those canopy trees as an edge in the verge, and that could be doing some of the ecological work.
Is the green in the middle of the kind of like loop on the first one, are those?
That would be a kind of picnic lawn, so
Okay.
that was kind of the thought there. That would be the gathering space.
Okay.
And then again, this would be kind of a gathering space within that meadow.
So for like a sense of kind of like scale, I guess, like if you were, having picnic with friends in one, I mean, how many picnics could you have in there?
How many friends do you want to invite?
Yeah, how many friends
on
do
the
you have?
side of the room,
Depends if you
right?
like the people
Yeah,
you're
it's about close to 40
guess.
40 plus feet across.
So we've got the scale, the
Yeah.
graphic scale down at the bottom right, so it's about
Okay.
40 by 30 maybe?
Yeah. So I think it's a good size.
How many friends do you have?
I mean, yeah, that's what I would like to know.
Well, family members alone ran over 100.
But I think, when you look at a small space like this, sizing things, right, sizing them so that you don't have, because you don't want 50 people in this space, right? You want it to be, like, that would be at capacity, right? This is gonna be a walk-in, there's no parking, this is a walk-to only destination. So you're carrying what you're bringing with you. We'll start to naturally limit how many people are there at a time to some degree.
I think there'll be a natural limit. And then is there, I mean, this is just conceptual, so if not, is there any sense of what the surface for the trail would be?
I think we want it to be accessible. We are dealing with some change in topography here, so that does start to limit. So you're looking at something that would so it limits you from doing stone dust, right? Which would be your kind of most natural accessible surface. Once you get over a 3% slope, you'll get erosion issues with stone dust. So then we're starting to look at our porous alternatives. I will bring up the awful idea of asphalt. Back in the day, people were like, no, you can't have asphalt, but if you look at all our top arboretums, they have asphalt paths.
Perky
The
pave?
benefit is you don't have runoff, you don't have sediment coming off.
Have you heard of Perky pave? Perky pave, it's like a
Yeah, so
forest.
that would, so
Yeah.
then so if you get away from asphalt,
Yeah,
so we are in semi-floodplain areas, so when you start to use porous pavements, they're not gonna give you the infiltration that you want. So then you're kind of like, what's the advantage of using that porous pavement, right? So, we are there's not a lot of things out there that we could look at, but in terms of what might be the most economical, best maintenance-wise, and still kind of a low carbon footprint, it might actually be the asphalt.
If you've been to Chanticleer, they have a recycled or pervious walkway surface. That's
And they are small enough that maybe we look at trying something new, and it's probably gonna cost a little bit more, but there might be a really cool new alternative in terms of a low carbon option that's gonna be stable and permanent.
That would still be acceptable.
Yeah, that would be
Yes.
accessible, yes.
Looking at the pictures of Shortridge that you shared with their large boulders,
Yeah,
is it realistic to get a bunch of those boulders, put them up here, maybe up to about the 10 feet? Because then people could, it's a natural obstacle that people could practice rock climbing
for
on.
bouldering.
I'm not even a rock
Yeah.
climber, but that would be cool to have that. Is that realistic?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you probably would really think of that.
Is that realistic to get a bunch of big boulders and put them up like,
I would say cost-wise, those big boulders are pretty expensive.
Alright.
Like you're looking, I'm looking at a couple of boulders just for a bridge revetment right now, and it's like, you're talking 30,000 just for like a couple
No.
of boulders. But on the other hand, that's kind of,
let's start growing our own.
You can steal them, you can roll them up.
Roll them up.
it's not a bad idea, and I would also, and this is more the landscape architect side, when I was in Europe, they have a lot of like prefab rock climbing structures
That
that.
blend in with.
Yeah,
And that would be less expensive.
That would be less expensive and
Yeah.
possibly less liability as well, so that's,
Yeah.
something that.
But does that take it away from that kind of quiet?
I think you could have,
It doesn't make much
It's only
noise
when
when
they
you
fall.
climb.
Well, I'm thinking about all the kids, I think about all the kids trying to climb,
You
yeah,
got
it becomes more about time.
two things going. One is a good idea, and the other one's the location,
yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it might not be this park. It might fit in well with next to.
Because it is a great idea.
Oh, thanks.
I think that could be cool here, and we'll explore it. I think that's a great, because I think, one of the things that I think that gets into the idea of nature, playing in nature, right?
Yeah.
For an older kid.
Like I just think about when I go bike riding in the Wissahickon and I go up by
Right.
the bus transfer station on my left, all that natural rock that's like this,
Yeah,
you see all the chalk because everyone's practicing on it. And then a bunch of all the other boulders as you go along the creek, there's people practicing, that's what I think of when I see this space going to
Yeah.
that.
And that really is, it's not intrusive. You don't realize you're coming up on climbers until you come around the corner and, oh.
Oh yeah, that's why I always ring my bell, otherwise when I.
So along those lines, so both concept and concept 1 and concept 2, they don't actually have the natural play features incorporated. These are just the
Yeah, and so
natural approach.
I think with both these concepts, maybe looking at more of like a sensory path. That's why I kind of added that into, might be relevant here. We can explore, so I think, again, maybe when we misinterpret the survey slightly, so we'll dig into that. So maybe we should incorporate more kind of natural play-based experiences. And I would lean towards, if we were doing something like bouldering, where that's gonna be a manufactured piece, right? That maybe we kind of go the other end with natural play and it be something more like picking up sticks and stacking to that degree to kind of balance it, so it's not all manufactured, if that is what people are envisioning.
I want to just mention it's 8:44.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question. The walking path, is that shaded or is that just like completely out in the open? Or?
Well, portions of it would be shaded, so I don't know how well you can see, but the existing trees are on the plan in the black
Oh,
circles and thin lines. So they would pass under the trees. So to that degree, there would be shade, and just as they're shown in this concept.
But the most, to maintain meadow, you do need more of an open, so, and that's why, like, with this idea of having that viewing pavilion have a shade structure on it, so that you do have some shade on the site, but with the meadow, the majority of the site would be in open sun.
I'll also say real quick, just that Pennsylvania's naturally, the climax here is a forest, so that's what things will naturally lean towards. So we actually have a paucity of meadows. We have fewer meadows and grasslands than ever existed because we also don't have fire regimes. So while our kind of tendency is to look towards trees as being the most valuable habitat, meadows are actually a very valuable habitat that we're limited in this area.
Lastly, real quick on this, how much of a distance-wise is the walking path? Did you figure that out?
That, I did not work those numbers
Okay.
out.
Okay.
And
That's a
the,
good
just,
question.
and the, so in this one, just the top left area, what would anything happen there, or would that just kind of be like?
That would just be natural. So that would be the natural meadow area.
Really gross, it's about 500 for that double loop there. 500 feet, not a lot, right? And the other thing is, if you have alternative routes, not all of them have to be ADA.
Mhm.
You use the ones that get to ADA where you want the destinations to say. None other ones don't have to.
Yeah, the ones that go over the boulders.
Yeah.
Or up. Good.
So we'll move on to Narberth Park.
Yeah, and we'll definitely share all of these, so additional feedback as you kind of digest and think more about them.
Absolutely. So as I said, we kind of took the least amount of change to the most amount of change approach here. So concept one, we looked at trying to utilize the existing pavement as much as possible. So keeping the existing basketball court layout. I guess I'm kind of going in opposite order here, starting at the bottom right, but just to make the point, the skate park remains in the same area. The footprint changes a little bit, and just north of the skate park would be that outdoor fitness area and the game court between the skate park and the playground, which we, in this concept, moved over. And to the left of all of that, you can see there's kind of a central walkway that bisects the park between all of those uses and the fields. So it creates an axis from the one entry where you can see that yellow circle where the two crosswalks on Windsor are, because we did get feedback that the entrance, the opening in the fence there doesn't quite line up with the crosswalks, right? So creating one entrance there central to those two crosswalks, and then just cutting across the park to Haverford, past a central pavilion, which you can see in the brown rectangle there, which would be a combined pavilion, restroom, performance area with a plaza in front of it, opening out to a lawn where people could gather for events. And that overlaps with the existing layout of the fields, with the exception of the 60-foot softball field, which would be shifted slightly northwest to make room for the pavilion and other amenities there. We're also proposing, if you go to the north left, the upper left, a widened sidewalk around the entire park. So that would be on the street side. And then in all three concepts, we propose using the pull-off area on Wynwood Avenue. Currently, there is a pull-off, utilizing that for events, pop-up events such as food trucks, and creating a widened sidewalk or even kind of a streetscape plaza there to accommodate that. And then within that area where the trees are kind of behind the bleachers, creating spaces, little mini plazas or seating areas, and paths that connect them. In this concept, we do show half of the bleachers being removed, the wooden bleachers, and keeping the bleachers that are on the Haverford end to still interact with the 90-foot field, and I guess fireworks too. I mentioned people use the bleachers for them. Let's see, I think that touches on everything in this concept. Oh, and we also do in this concept show kind of an enlarged, improved plaza at the entrance of the library that serves as the library entrance and arrival point at the park as well. Okay, so then concept 2 of 3. Once again, we show that widened sidewalk around the perimeter of the park, but I guess I'll start at the bottom right again. So here we're proposing changing the layout of the existing parking lot to create a one-way loop, which does remove 18 spaces, but there's the addition of a drop-off along the left side of the parking lot, and then along Haverford, we're proposing back-end angled parking, which picks up 9 spaces from the current parallel parking there. And that ends where it does on the western side because of the 90-foot existing field and not interfering with the outfield there. If that weren't a consideration, that parking could potentially go further and pick up even more spaces. So coming from that bottom corner there, we're looking at adjusting the layout of the basketball courts to accommodate that angled parking, which does cut into the perimeter of the park, and bringing the skate park to up to that Haverford frontage alongside the basketball courts. And then once again, we've got a central pavilion, restroom, performance area, which interacts with both a plaza and lawn area on the east side, and just an open, or a lawn area on the left side. The difference here is that this concept shows these areas as bosques of trees versus just an open lawn. So where people would be sitting amongst like a grid of trees to provide that shade. In this concept, we also showed that greenhouse just to the southwest of the library, and that is adjacent to the playground, which in this concept is divided into 2 separate playgrounds by age, so a tot lot and age 5 to 12 playground. And placing the greenhouse alongside the playground could potentially afford opportunities for intergenerational interactions. And in this concept, we do not actually propose an entrance at the crosswalks on Windsor, but instead at the library. So and the idea here was to explore the idea of whether we want there to be 2 entrances right next to the playground, or just restrict it to 1 for the sake of controlling the perimeter, so to speak. You know, because when it comes to playgrounds, you get into the conversation also of, do we fence the playground in, or do we fence the entire park in? How do we make sure that they're safe, especially with the traffic concerns on Windsor? And let's see, once again, you know, we're showing use of that truck pull-off. It's kind of a smaller plaza there and 1 seating area, which preserves more of the existing trees in that area, and also leaves room for all of the bleachers to remain. So yeah, that
I
is.
think also with this concept, because of kind of shifting things around with the basketball, so we lose the length required for the football field. So,
Oh, yes.
So that's not represented on this. But I think, you know, when you're looking at all these concepts, there's ways that these can be mixed and matched if there's certain program elements that have to remain, but we're still kind of exploring all options.
Who owns the green, if we were to put a greenhouse? Like, who
Isn't
owns
that
that?
just borough property where the
So
the garden is? That's borough property, right?
Yeah, we would probably, it'd be like a community greenhouse where we'd hope for volunteers to come out and take care of it, but, you know, if not, then like
it
Public
just,
Works.
oh, so it's Jeff's job.
So I think there's a lot of, City of Reading has a great example of a public greenhouse that the local master gardeners operate out of. So that you really would want to champion, right?
Yeah.
To pursue a project like that. So your master gardeners would be a great, looking at conservancies, there might be a conservancy that wants to be able to grow native, like maybe this is just focused on native plants and growing plugs. So I think there's a lot of options to explore with that, but it's, yeah. So.
We do have a group that manages the community garden here, and they do a very nice job. And there's also one at Sabine Park that they manage.
Good.
So I
I just wondered, because everything else
Yeah.
makes sense, it's the greenhouse, because Because, you see some of those and they're dilapidated because nobody kept them up. And we couldn't have that happen in this nice new environment.
I guess they've proven that they're so responsible with these two
Yeah.
community gardens that I could see a greenhouse working because they've demonstrated their commitment.
They
and-
do a great job,
Yeah.
yeah.
so-
Okay, sorry. Just-
I like the idea of a champion for a greenhouse.
Yeah,
You need the Jolly Green Giant to live there.
somebody who's, yeah, is gonna take ownership of it.
Take ownership.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
An idea that just occurred to me too, you mentioned native plugs plantings. I imagine that folks who come to the farmer's market love buying native plants for their own gardens at home. And that could be a potential source of funding, even if it's just to keep the greenhouse
Yeah,
running,
and
right?
this
Have an
connection
annual or
between them.
biannual plant sale. Just a thought.
But
Okay.
this doesn't have the link for football.
This concept, correct.
Right,
I mean, we could probably finesse things to get that into here, but really what's constraining you is having that, so the skate park is modeled off of what Radnor, because that was what was given as like an example, so I think this one's a little smaller than what's at Radnor.
It is, yeah.
So I think that's having the skate park kind of down along Haverford, which we think makes a lot of sense in terms of just having those kind of louder activities further away from your residences, and then also having visibility from the street into the basketball courts and the skate plaza or park makes a lot of sense. But that's what's kind of restricting that current length on the football
I
field.
liked on the first concept, the location of the pavilion that you had, because it would allow for a lot more seating, and also it would face Wynwood, which, so think about like noise and how it travels, right? Currently it faces Windsor towards the neighbors, so if it were to face Wynwood, it's already like a highly traveled road, so, and you're just facing an apartment complex, Thomas Quinn Apartments over there, so I feel like, and it would also allow for more people to like for viewing, so I feel like that probably makes more sense like this.
I guess like here on like for concept one, I guess is there any way to do, because we talked about the path, like the loop concept with Elm Grove, but
We got a third concept.
okay.
Just you wait.
Bring it on.
So speaking of the next concept, so this is the most intense,
There we
or the most change to the current condition, the largest change being the daylighting of the stream. And let's see, where do we start? So talking about paths. Here we show the existing sidewalks remaining in that hot pink, but here we really explore that more internal walking network. So a loop trail around the ball fields, connecting to other trails to that food truck pull-offs and seating areas in there. Here the bleachers completely disappear, as does the 90-foot ball field. And it's replaced by a 70-foot field in the northwest corner. And the soccer is reoriented. And that walking loop, as actually Jesse recommended, could be through meadows that are dispersed along the perimeters of the ball fields to create a really nice experience for pedestrians there. And then across the daylighted creek is a bridge that then leads to the walkways on the east side. And there, once again, you see pretty immediately at that crossing that events lawn with the pavilion right up against the library in the parking lot. So at the one end of the park versus being central. Skate park below it. And this is also a little smaller than the example at Radnor as well. New layout of the basketball courts as well to kind of align with this orientation. And the playground pretty much in the same place as the other concepts as well. And here the crossings across the creek are at the central point at the bridge and then along the sidewalks. So you've got connections to the sidewalk on either side of the creek. In which case maybe we would propose a widened sidewalk for that portion. So on this one, the baseball fields are smaller?
They are, right.
Sarah?
So, yeah, so again, that kind of, when we talk about the 90-foot field, that's a regional amenity that serves a much greater community. There's a lot of value in a 70-foot field, so that's geared more towards baseball. They can be developed so that they work for 60-foot softball and 70-foot. But in the baseball community, it's called the Cal Ripken is the 70-foot field, and the thought is for younger kids that are playing baseball to go from a 60 field to a 90-foot field is a drastic change in baseball. So the 70-foot field is something that kind of helps bridge that change as kids get older. So it is a field that there are not a lot of them around, so a lot of communities are looking to add them. Again, as we kind of meet with the baseball and softball community and get a better idea, I mean, I anticipate nobody's going to want to lose a 90-foot field. I know a lot of investment has been put into that field, but I think as you start to look at the future of the park, there should be a lot of consideration about.
Because how many people is it really serving? Besides the Narberth American Legion team, and that's its highest uses now, right, Joe? Because it's a summer season. I played Legion ball too. Like, yeah, that's what you do in the summer. So what?
And it's
3
also a
months out of the
demographic
year.
that can easily travel,
3
right?
months out of the year for one team. So okay.
Can you go back to the concept 2 for a second? That's the edge, right? Something's. Skateboard, okay. Oh, the 2 lots, so the playground becomes back to just one.
Right, yeah.
So then the 60-foot field would be softball all dirt? That would be
It could
softball,
be
right?
grass or dirt, yeah.
Well, softball has to be all dirt,
Currently, it's a grass field that you have out there.
but it's not, it's for beginner softball,
Okay.
but not,
So we could redevelop it as an all dirt if that's what
well, if
people
the demand is there
want.
from the community,
Yeah,
but yeah, it would have to be all dirt for real softball.
yeah.
Can we talk about the ecological parts of the
Do
concept?
you want to get all
I
three of
just
them?
want to, I want to make one point about this concept and then go to all 3. So, as Sarah said, we can mix and match elements from each of these concepts, right? And these are something to talk around, but just because the 90-foot field is removed from the concept where we daylight the stream doesn't necessarily mean that that has to happen if the stream is daylighted. Just want to make that clear. Like it's just, that happens to show up in that concept. So-
Are there any stormwater features in concept 1 and concept 2? Or are there?
Yeah, there would, I mean, most of it would be met with underground. So like in concept 1, the skate park's a new development, so the stormwater would go under the skate park, right? In concept 2, you have the option of putting it under the basketball court or the skate park, right? So I think there's ways that, but it would definitely be met. And even in concept 3, we'd probably be looking at some subsurface storage because you have no storage at all currently for all the impervious that's happening. So as you redevelop these things, you're gonna have to accommodate storage for the permitting. So whether or not you daylight the stream, as you redevelop impervious in the park, you're gonna have to permit and have some way of storing the stormwater. And at that point, the question might be, do we accommodate the whole municipal complex to some degree in that storage? And it'll be a little bit of a can of worms as you start to unpack and open that up when we actually get into permitting improvements.
You haven't approached the stormwater on this site from the entire civic point of view, just this site. But it is the nexus of all your stormwater through this site. So if we start to open this up and Pinoni says, you got something going there, which we've talked to them early when we were doing the grant applications, right? We wanted that in the mix. Stormwater was part of those early ideas, and so they said we don't have a lot of places in the borough that we have options of dealing with it. Public spaces are probably our best options. Interviewing with them is going to be very interesting, especially for this one.
When are you meeting with Pinoni?
Next week.
What day?
I'm sorry I don't have, in my spreadsheet back there, I'll let you know.
Okay.
I would think on the whole
Jeff's invited to that as
stormwater
well.
issue, the borough has to start to really talk about that and make it very known it's an issue that has to be dealt with, because if this is the main place where we could do something with stormwater, that's gonna be a big change for the borough, for the people. So they need to understand, and I don't, we need to understand fully what is needed and what are the options to be able to address that. I don't know what they are, but I just think that's, my whole thing, what I've been trying to say with this study and to other people I talk to is pay attention, listen, be involved, because things get done, people spend a lot of time, and then there's an uproar and things don't get done. And that's what we don't want to have happen. So I think we need to get a little bit more information out to the public. I need to know more about what we need to do stormwater-wise, what our requirements are going to be, and what can be done.
And I think, when we look at the site, there's two different issues, right? There's the actual, if this was just a park anywhere else in the township where you weren't dealing with the convergence of all your stormwater, if we were to redevelop, if we were to add basketball courts and add parking, we would have to accommodate all that stormwater permit-wise for both what you require as a municipality and what the county requires from an APDS permit, which is that's a federally mandated permit process that you go through. That's administered at the county level. So there's that kind of issue, right? And then looking at the fact that we're in a floodplain adds a little bit of difficulty to that, right? So I think so today we're trying to look at like the programmatic, like what do we want? And as we kind of lock into what we want, then we kind of have to say, where can we actually address stormwater for the park? And then the second would be for the whole borough, right?
Yes, with the ecological concept, I'll just call it, with the floodplain, it's a small area, but it would really help with slowing the water down as it moves through the borough. So right now, these are fairly low flow streams most of the time, but whenever you have these storms which are increasing in frequency and intensity, they become really flashy, and that is bad for the infrastructure itself. So all those places that are walled off, that you've put in the new gabions, all that, it's going to kind of become more structurally unsound, and then just also biologically, you're really scouring everything that's living every time that goes through. So even just kind of having that small amount of stream being open and then allowing that floodplain on either side of it is going to significantly improve water quality. The specifics of that, Pinoti, I get my hand knocked by engineers sometimes because, engineers and ecologists, we look at things differently. There's a way to get symbiosis to work on all these things together. So that's kind of just one of the benefits of that, of thinking about those services with the stormwater, of kind of everybody's stormwater. It's, like Sarah's talking about. And then as far as the permitting, when you are in a floodplain, even if it's not currently a floodplain because it's underwater, it does open you up to, FEMA permitting, wetland, like Chapter 105 permitting. There's a whole other set of permitting that comes in even if you're not seeing that water, that kind of can make it more challenging. So, we're in this preliminary phase, but those permitting issues will eventually come up.
And we'll identify them in the master plan, the written report. They'll be identified in terms of what to anticipate.
Can you give a general sense of, in terms of like expense and difficulty and impact to stormwater between daylighting and the stream and doing the underground facilities under, can you?
Well, so let's, just to be clear, for concept 3, it would probably have both. Mm-hmm. The daylighting of the stream isn't gonna accommodate the impervious surface that we're adding. We're gonna have to address them separately. So in all of these concepts, there'll probably be some sort of underground storage.
But you're asking if costs are going to be part of your information,
right? Well, costs, and also, so I would assume though that the delineating of the stream does reduce the intensity or the amount of underground facilities that you would need.
So it does reduce the amount of underground. It would be the most expensive because you are looking at a significant amount of earthwork that's going to go into something like this. I would look at it is a big upfront cost, but you are looking at sort of reducing infrastructure maintenance down the line when it comes to the area that's downstream of it. And then also, you need to kind of look a little bit further, this would be more Pinoni's realm, to look into the MS4 calculations of how much you would be saving in your MS4 costs with having that. And I don't have those calculations right now, because this is just kind of the preliminary phase, but that would definitely be the consideration, but it would be an intensive effort and cost upfront for that type of effort.
Jean, what Pinoni, if you don't mind me adding on, what Pinoni's gonna do, they've already said, we have conversations, but, and in the update MS4 that they had sent to me, that the park is slated for some type of a treatment to satisfy MS4, right? So most of the stuff that the Borough has to do is to remove sediment, right? And this kind of facility that we're showing in Concept 3 is probably the largest bang for the buck to reduce sediment for the MS fleet, right? So what I'm looking forward to talking to you, this might not have ever been on their concept, but certainly you can make calculations, literally numerical calculations about how much that, you see in number 3, could reduce sediments and get you that much closer. I bet it would blow Pinoni away, because whatever they might thought, I don't think would do nearly as well as what we're
Could that
showing
also
for 3.
potentially reduce our, because right now our pollution reduction plan has 19 stormwater bump outs in the plan. Could that reduce the need for those?
Right, I mean, you've got that accounting, right? You need to, maybe the permit is saying, you have to reduce it by 10% in 5 years. 10% number is actually calculable, and you could say, well, this one would get us that far. 19 bump outs would get us this far. It is definitely numbers.
There might be a long-term thought in terms of, if it does work out, that you could like put all your MS4 into one basket, let's just say, as opposed to a bunch spread out across all your streets with curb bump outs and things like that. From a maintenance point of view, it might be more easily to maintain kind of one central BMP as opposed to a bunch of little ones. Now, this is not to say that this is a simple maintenance design. I mean, in theory, it would be a naturalized environment, so I don't want to just throw something on Jeff and say, hey, look, this is what you need to maintain. But there is some consideration to be given to that it might be easier to maintain one central feature as opposed to a bunch of little ones throughout the whole borough.
Or we could move Crystal Lake
Yeah,
to Elm Grove and make that our lake there.
there was some interest in swimming, I remember seeing that in the survey.
Is that Joe?
So I do want to respect everyone's time, we are a little over. So I think our job is to kind of, we'll write up notes from tonight. We'll definitely, these plans will be shared with you, the presentation will be shared with you, we'll give you bigger versions, 11 by 17 of each plan. And also share those with Alan to get up on the project website. We meet again September 11th, but we definitely have a lot of stuff we'll be doing before that. Our hope is kind of, as we start to kind of collect information through the key person interviews in July, going into August, that we can give you kind of maybe a pre-draft plan for your August meeting. So that's going to be all of the ideas that we hear from you and from the various key person interviews kind of combined into one concept. So I think maybe with that in mind, within the next week or two, if you guys can kind of share maybe a little more idea in terms of, should we pursue a concept that doesn't explore a football field, that doesn't include, like, are we comfortable with losing certain amenities in the park? And I think that's where we really need some feedback from, and obviously the stakeholder meeting with the park users will be key to that. It's unfortunate that that's harder to kind of schedule in the summer, so we will try to get that on the schedule for, well, I mean, we're gonna have to try to meet mid-August with them, I think is the reality, so that we can really have an informed decision on some of that.
What we also talked about today, to Jean's point, is working toward a draft for your August discussion without us here, really for you. But also, Jean, like a toolkit for costing, like this is what, I'll just use like a tennis court costs. this is how much a court area with this kind of surfacing per square foot. So as you're looking at the concepts that we will give you, you folks can kind of see what rises to the top. We want to give you just something that's not going to overwhelm you, because back to Sarah's point, you want this to be what you want, what Marburg wants. And then we will certainly be practical and look at the costs, and then we will certainly look at what we have to give up for stormwater, and that will certainly, but why not? I mean, this is our master planning. This is what we want to be for Narberth, what people want, right? What they all see as the greatest, what you all want to see as well. We'll give you the aids to sort of look at how you can look at this and say, this is how much this one's going to cost and how much this one's going to cost. And oh, by the way, yes.
And I think, and it is valuable, but also any of these concepts, no matter what the cost, can be phased. So I think as much as it's important to kind of understand what is this daylighting of the stream, what's the order of magnitude for something like that, and we can start to talk about that a little bit more as we move forward. We didn't want to talk about that tonight because it's more of a, what is your reaction? Do you want that natural space in the center of your park? I think some people are going to be on either end of that. Some people are going to be like, oh, we just gave up so much to put a stream in, where other people are like, this is exactly where we should be heading. So I think kind of understanding that community value without putting a price tag to it is important. Because we are looking at something that, you know, this is, what, 1895, right? So we're over 100 years later. What's the next 100 years of this park going to look like? And so kind of try to disassociate a little bit from price tags.
That seems like such a big decision. And so but you're saying you're looking for direction from the committee to like kind of...
To some degree, yeah. I mean, we need some feedback, because between, as you can see, between now, so we meet with you once in September where we're going to present a draft plan. And so that's going to be one plan with costs provided for that plan. So between now and then, we need feedback from you in terms of, out of what you saw tonight, what's a deal breaker? What's something that you said, wow, I love that? You know, that's the type of feedback we kind of need to understand from kind of looking at these program concepts.
And you'll be able to, because you haven't really started a lot of those interviews, and
Right.
you might get very strong feedback.
Sure.
So just.
And we'll be sharing that with
Yes,
you as we get
that's
it.
where I think we need to understand what you're hearing
Right.
in some of those, as well as, I mean, that's one of the purposes of why we're here, is to help guide this, taking into consideration that feedback. So I don't know if our next meeting is August 14th, I think I saw, and that one would be where we might look at what you've just shown us,
Right.
as well as more, because by then you would have had some interviews.
Mhm.
And then, but then September, you're gonna be able to actually show us a master plan.
Correct.
Will you have the stakeholder interviews in August or July?
Those are going to be it. So the key person ones are mostly in July. They'll spread into August a little bit,
Right.
but we're trying to get the key ones up front. The stakeholder ones, because they're larger groups of people, are most likely going to be in the end of August. But we're trying to get them scheduled as early as possible. It's just,
So we
like,
will get that feedback until...
yeah, so like Station Square.
Until they do the master plan,
Yeah.
it sounds like.
And that's where we're kind of, up against that a little bit. So I think the key one will be the user groups, and maybe we just have to figure out a way to have that happen sooner than later.
Right. That's crossed my mind.
So I think if there's
If you're
any,
looking at the timeline, it's almost, you gotta get it done sooner, because how can you wait to the end of August? Here's some tremendously disheartening feedback.
and maybe, so I know we have an email list, maybe we, if the committee's comfortable, I mean, these concepts this is a public meeting, you know, they're going up on the website. Maybe it's as much as just sharing those concepts with them and getting initial feedback.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I'd
we
be
just have
okay
to
with that.
preference that these are concept study diagrams. They're not by any means a final design, and we just need to understand,
Communities.
where we're at.
Right, and that can actually begin that education about what Dennis was saying about, we can't just throw this on people and say, hey, guess what? So, I mean, the more we can share up front, these are there's costs and benefits, I guess, to doing certain things. And, we as a community have to decide, is a 70-foot, is that what it would be? Versus a 90, by giving that up, we're gaining this, and just start that conversation with them now.
It almost makes me wonder, just because this is such a huge, shift or decision point, do we need to adjust the timeline just because the summer is kind of challenging?
I'm sitting there looking at the timeline going like, when can
Yeah.
we move this back a little bit,
I was thinking the same thing.
I mean,
We don't want to miss
But
that
we owe-
opportunity.
But I
When do
think-
we owe something to the people that paid for this? What DDR, is it, remember there's a timeline that they gave us too.
Yeah, so I think we're okay with DCNR. There is
Yeah, you
a-
should be okay
yeah.
with that.
There's a PICO grant that I think is by the end of the year, that we will need to use that funding by the end of the year.
They're not very strict either.
Okay.
Typically funders,
I-
if you contact them, you can usually get an extension as long as it's sort of preemptive like now.
I'd want to bump it back a couple of weeks on the next September 11 one. I mean, if you're not going to get to the, and I know you're trying to get everything you can, but talking to the park users and the stakeholders, I think, I mean, because it's logical you're saying, well, give us some direction, but I'd like to hear what
What they
most people are
said,
telling us.
because we need
so I
to use
could give
that
you
too in our
direction.
thinking.
That's
Yeah.
all, yeah.
I mean, I think, and we can talk through this with Alan maybe following up tomorrow. So what that would do to the schedule, just thinking through just prior plans, similar schedules. So we're pushing things back with you guys for a month. So we would meet with you guys in October as opposed to September, right? So that pushes our final plan out to January because, December, now you don't have meetings in December. So I think we probably would be comfortable with that. I don't see a problem with that. We're holding to the same number of meetings and the same deliverables. It just gives us that room to kind of really have those stakeholder
I don't
meetings
see any
at the right
problem
time.
with being with the
Yeah.
funding agency problem.
No, there wouldn't be a problem.
For
And
other
there's still have time
That
for the next round of
Yeah.
applications we would do in April.
I mean, you're the experts, you've done other master park plans, and in other communities where you've done this, is this like the timeline that
Here's
you?
what happened with this
Yeah.
one. The time we got started, put a lot of the interactive work during the heat of the summer.
Hardest time to get people.
Right?
Yeah.
We always tried not to do that.
Right.
This one it did, so.
Well, and we pushed back that first public
Right.
meeting
Right.
to.
If we were to move that one for the draft master plan from September to October, wouldn't the public meeting then also move?
Yeah, it would move down
everything
to
into
later
November?
October. It could even be later October.
Later October,
Because
okay.
typically when we present a draft plan to the committee, it's like a 2-week preview before we go to the public. So those usually are coupled pretty
So if you
closely.
can talk to Alan and just figure out what kind of a timeline, so that we can get that valuable feedback from these
Yeah.
KPIs and one-on-one interviews, so that we know too what the red flags appear to be.
Yeah.
I mean, for things like the skate park too, we're working on some really rough ideas of what the program space would be.
Yeah,
I think if we give it a little bit more time, we might be able to zero in on that better. Because I'm not sure the space that we're showing there is what the users are going to want.
well, they're gonna want the whole park.
Exactly, exactly. But you have to have a certain threshold to make that skate new plaza work.
Yeah.
So figuring out, in general, which apparatus would go in there, that starts to give us a real size.
Right, so getting that feedback from
Getting that
them,
feedback
because they had
is
definite
important
ideas, I remember
because
that.
If that's going to be an important part of the park, it's going to have a tendency to want to expand and take over other things.
Right,
So we really need to be zeroed in on.
and then we need to think about it from the most value in terms of the most amount of people, but give them as much as we can in terms of what they want and need.
And then, you get into, okay, this is what the skate plaza wants. Can it share space with another use?
Yeah.
Shop, right? That's the next level we're trying to do. So there's good reasons why you're trying to do that. It's more interactive, it gives the community, doesn't segregate each population as much.
Yeah.
More interesting.
All right, so you two will talk, or all of you
Yeah,
will talk,
Anita.
come up with a new timeline, share it with us. And we will still plan on meeting in August, at 7 o'clock, if that meets everyone. And we will see what you're able to tell us at
I was just gonna say,
that
I'll
point.
certainly, the whole committee will get every note, all the notes from every KPI.
Yeah. No, that's
Send that out.
absolutely.
And then
Right,
this
and
will
then-
also all be posted on the webpage as well.
Yeah, the KPI notes I don't think are they going on the webpage as we do them, or typically we pull off and put those in the appendix of the report? But
Yeah.
whatever you guys wanna do with those is fine.
If they go in the appendix of the report, is there any reason not to post them on the webpage if they're gonna be in there anyway?
No, I mean, there might be some, I think the only reason why sometimes we hold them back and let them be a little more
Okay.
supporting
Because I didn't-
to why
I
we
didn't
got to
think
the
they
final
were.
design, is because there might be some really strong ideas that get put in those notes that don't necessarily reflect the way the design's going, if that makes sense. So it might, I mean, sometimes having a public response to something is good, but someone might get a hold of it and say, look what they're trying to do, and then, so,
I do feel like it's a little
Gotcha.
early to just completely release it out into the public because it's very early concepts.
Oh, we were talking about KPIs, but you're talking about
yeah.
concepts.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they're already out in the public.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Then
That's a good
Well, I think we
Yeah.
want,
Yeah.
I think we want it out there. I think
Yeah.
we want them because they can think about
Yes.
these ideas too.
And they have your email address, if I remember correctly.
yeah, we just need to make it clear that like we're in the very early stages.
Yeah.
If people understand that there is a lot of thought going into options for, let's take the football field, for example. I'm sure there's going to be a very vocal group of proponents for a major league football field, right? Or a maximum size baseball field. But if they see that there are other options under consideration, you will flush out the opinions. And there'll be people screaming about this point of view or that point of view, and that's important information to get early. If you'll find out if there's gonna be a armed rebellion of the football players and they wear helmets.
Yeah.
Those guys, you wanna know about that right away.
Yes,
I suspect you're not gonna get that particular one, but you may get in the case of options for baseball fields, you may get more controversy than you think.
Yeah, contrasts are a vessel for
And
expression
that's good to
values.
flush out now.
Yeah,
That's the whole point. You don't want to go through the whole thing and then,
and people feel like they were locked out and they didn't have a voice.
Is it possible to keep the survey respondents like apprised of all the updates, you know, because we have.
Yeah, I think we were collecting emails, so we can send out,
That is part of
Yeah.
the list we have, I've taken them all off of that last question and developed a
Yeah.
spreadsheet.
I'm just thinking they would appreciate it if they could see like how the process is playing out from the time that they took the
Good idea.
survey.
yeah, I think, let's draft an email and kind of run it by everybody, but I think even if we share the link to where these go up, like the website, and then maybe we open up a new link to give feedback on just the
Yeah,
concepts.
that would be really nice.
And we'll do a little feedback form on the concepts. And
So
that way people.
but the existing survey is listed as going through September.
Yeah, it's still
That's-
active, and we'll keep the existing survey up, but if people want to give specific feedback on the concepts, we'll have a different link.
well, I think that makes sense. They're saying these are things I like, but now they see how the whole
What it
picture
means,
is
yeah,
being developed. And they can, you know, there will be some
Something's
strong
gotta
comments, you know. But that's okay.
It'll be an open-ended form, but it'll give us a way to kind of maybe give a little description about each concept, so.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was worried that, they took the survey and then they wouldn't hear anything until like the draft plan comes out, and then
Right.
you'd rather hear what they have to say earlier on before you get too
Absolutely.
far along. Yeah.
And I think the stakeholder meetings, so I mean, we will present these concepts at the stakeholder meetings as well. So that also gives a way for the public to kind of feed in.
And once that, it's gonna be a separate web address or something. we're
Yeah,
gonna-
it'll be a different.
Then we can stick that in the weekly Narberthian.
Yeah. The news flash.
Yeah.
Yeah. I caught the email blast. I never really caught the news flash, but.
I just called them Narberthian.
Yeah.
All right, it's 9:31,
All
we're
right.
gonna call it.
Hello.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Not for